Hi guys, Tiffany here of Tiffany Gordon Cosplay, and welcome to my YouTube channel where you get all of my latest cosplay tutorials. And if you're new to the channel, I'd love to have you as part of our community, so like the video and subscribe to the channel. On today's cosplay tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I made my Jane Foster Thor helmet. Yee! And the best thing is, it's made out of EVA foam. So let's get started. And for making this helmet, you're gonna need 2 and 4mm EVA foam, Sharpies, Costools circle cutter, Costools hole drill, contact cement glue, X-Acto knife and a cutting mat, a Dremel, sanding drums, heat gun, a mannequin head, Plasti Dip, airbrush paint, airbrush gun and compressor, masking tape, paint brushes, sealer, and of course all of your safety gear. And I'll have links to all of these in the description. And let's not forget about a pattern, and I have a 2D pattern available on my website www.tiffanygordoncosplay.com, or see the link below. The first part that we're going to talk about for this helmet is the wings, specifically the inside part of the wings. And for this, I traced the wing shape onto 2mm EVA foam, and this piece is going to be what everything is glued onto. Once it was all traced, I then used a heat gun and heat treated all of the foam before cutting it with an X-Acto knife. This made it so all of the pieces would stay its shape and they wouldn't round, and it made it just a lot easier to work with. A helpful tip throughout this entire build is to also have Ziploc baggies and label them, so that way when you cut all 20 billion tiny little pieces from this 2mm foam, you can put them in a Ziploc baggie and know which piece it's going to attach to. Also, labeling each one on the pieces really helped. And once all of the pieces were cut out, I then used my pattern again to trace where I wanted the pieces to be glued onto. This way, it was a lot easier to know where to align all of the pieces. For all of the small circle pieces, I used Costools hole drills and used that to cut the circles. And then I used contact cement glue and applied it onto all of the small pieces as well as all of the larger pieces. A helpful tip for all of these small pieces for gluing is to put tape upside down, so that way you can stick all of the small foam pieces to the tape and it won't move when you apply the glue. And once all the glue was dry, you can start attaching the pieces together. And for me, I found using a pair of tweezers, fine tip ones, made it 10 times easier to place all of your pieces and to specifically align them. Now for the outside part of the wings. And for these pieces, I used the pattern and made each of the pieces a little bit wider than what they should be, so that way each of the individual wing sections would overlap. And for these, I traced onto 4mm EVA foam, used a heat gun to heat treat the EVA foam, and then cut them out using an X-Acto knife. Now for details, and for this, I used my wood burner, specifically a flat tip one, and added a bunch of little details into the foam. And this is where the wood burner is burning marks into the foam and will leave this really nice texture. And I did this for the trim part as well as for all of the wing pieces, and for the wing sections I switched to a hot wand point. Then to add all of the pieces, and again I used contact cement glue, this time applying all of the small detail pieces first. And because I wanted these wings to overlap and give a more three-dimensional look, I ended up sanding the edges of each of the wings at a slight 45 where the wing would overlap it. And then glued the pieces to our 2mm inner wing piece, starting from the bottom and working my way up with the wings. And then doing the trim last. Next to my workbench, and for this I used a sanding drum and sanded all of the edge pieces flat, and then went back and rounded them, so that way it looked more realistic. The last part on the wings that we're going to discuss is the circle bird emblems. And for this, I used Cos Tools circle cutter, cutting the outer circle as well as cutting the trim part for the circle out of 4mm EVA foam. And for the actual bird symbol, I wanted to try a new method which I used throughout my Thor cosplay, and I created stamps for the foam. And this is a 3D CAD STL file that is available on my website www.tiffanygordon.cosplay.com, or see the link below. And for this process, you're going to want to print out this file so you have a actual piece, and you're going to take your heat gun and heavily heat up your EVA foam circle to the point that it's almost too much heated up. And then while it is still hot, you're going to quickly turn off the heat gun, grab your stamp, and push it into the foam with full force and leave it there for a good 30 seconds before removing it. And it will leave this nice indentation of the bird stamp into your foam. But if you don't want to do this, that's totally fine, and you can always use a wood burner and carve into this piece, or you can cut the bird shape out of 2mm and glue it on top, but this is the way I decided to do it. I will note also that by doing the stamping process, your foam does shrink quite a bit more than I was anticipating. So I recommend cutting out your circle trim after so you know how much your foam piece shrank. Then glued the trim to the circle piece and then sanded it. The last step is to attach it to the wings, and then your wings on the helmet are done. Now to talk about the main helmet part. And this piece you will want to trace onto 4mm EVA foam twice. And for all of the detail sections out of 2mm. Then just repeat with the heat gun and heat treating your foam, and then cutting out the pieces with an X-Acto knife. Then to glue all of the seams, and I recommend gluing one side of the helmet at a time using contact cement glue. And I tried to make all of these seams where they were going to be nice with the design or hide it as much as possible. And once you have the two halves done and glued, you can glue them together to make one. Now for more details, and again for this I used my wood burner with the hot wand attachment, following all the lines that were on the pattern, and then for a detailed trim on the back part, I used the flat tip and just made little boxes around the edge. And then again with the flat tip, for the, I don't know what they're called, but the scrolly things at the top, I made lines and did hash lines going the opposite way as well. Then to start adding all the 2mm detail pieces, and for this I recommend tracing where you think they will align best onto the foam using a Sharpie, and then glue them together. And for the back of the helm, I did end up adding a strip of 2mm EVA foam, and I added just some sanding details in it, so it gave it a little bit more dimension. And then for the mask part of this helm, for this you're going to want to trace the parts of the mask onto 4mm EVA foam and cut out. There are also some guidelines for the nose part, and you will want to draw these, and then using an X-Acto knife that with an extremely sharp blade, you'll want to cut at a 45 degrees on each of these lines, cutting in both directions, and then you'll have this triangle piece that you will be able to remove the foam from. Just be careful not to cut all the way down through the foam. And by doing this, you'll be able to bend the mask into that shape easily. Next, apply contact cement glue to each of these cut out grooves as well as to the edges, and once it is dry, you can attach all the pieces together. And for cleanup for this, you're just going to want to go to the workbench and sand all of the edges round using a sanding drum, and that should complete your mask. And I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the mask as well, so again, using my wood burner and the hot wand tip, I just made my lines into it, and it made it pop that much more. And all that's left to do for this is to attach the mask to the helm. I recommend putting your helm on a mannequin head and then putting the mask on so you can kind of relatively see where it will align best for you to glue them together. And after that, you can start attaching the wings to the helm as well. Check in on your furry critters, make sure they're doing okay. And the final piece for this helm is the cap section. And I decided to be a lazy bum because I didn't want to make a point out of EVA foam, but you can. Or you can get my 3D CAD STL file for the specific spike and 3D print it and glue it onto your piece like I did. And now that your helm is finished, it is time to prime it. And for this, I used 3 heavy coats of Plasti Dip onto the outside as well as the inside part of this helm. And I highly recommend putting it on a mannequin head. This way you can easily move it around and get to all of those pieces. And after waiting 24 hours for your Plasti Dip to dry, you can then start to paint. And for me, I used my Iwata Eclipse airbrush gun and Createx Colors Wicked Color airbrush paint for this piece. But if you don't have airbrush paint and airbrush gun, you can always hand paint your piece following similar method. And the first coat of paint that you're going to want to do is a base coat of white, applying it to where all of the gold sections are going to be. This is going to make all of your next color pop on top of the surface and not look so dull. And once that coat of paint was dry, the next color I used was Pearl Copper, applying it to all of the white sections. Now for shadowing, and for this I used Jet Black and Pearl Copper, mixing them together. And for this, in small sections at a time, I applied this color, and while it was still wet, I wiped it away. This would leave all of the darker shadow colors into all of the creases and along the edges and would make everything have a more antique-like finish. And then one more time with Pearl Copper just on some of the tips to give a little bit more highlight and make the piece not as muddy. Now that all the gold pieces are done, once it's dry, you can mask it off with masking tape. And for this, you want to use Scotch brand masking tape and rip the piece in a strip, apply it to your leg. This way it'll be a little bit less adhesive, and then apply it onto the gold sections. This will make it the least likely for it to remove your paint when removing the masking tape later on. And then back to painting, and our base coat for this color is again going to be white, and you're gonna use this, apply it to all of the rest of the surfaces, and you will go back over where any of the gold spray was and it will no longer be there. Once that was dry, it's time for the next color, and for that we're gonna be using Quicksilver, again applying it to all of the white parts, which is the rest of the helmet. Then for shading and giving that antique look, again, we're going to be using the same method that I talked about earlier, and this time it's going to be with Quicksilver and black, applying it in small sections at a time, and while the paint is still wet, wiping it away with a paper towel. And then one more time with just Quicksilver and applying it where I wanted more highlighted pieces to be and make it look a little less muddy in certain sections. And when that's dry, you can then remove all of your masking tape and reveal all of the gold sections again. And for me, for this Thor cosplay that I made, I did this throughout all of the pieces, and I like to go back and add a tiny bit more black to just make things visually pop more for photography reasons. And for me, I like to go back with a black Sharpie pen and just follow some of the lines. And this is such a subtle detail, but in photos, you really notice it. But it's not a necessary step. And the last step before finishing your helm is to seal all of the paint. And for me, I used Createx Colors UVLS Satin, applying it by hand with a paintbrush, doing a light, even coat throughout the helmet. You can also use an airbrush gun to apply this, but I like to do it by hand. And then I present to you the helm! And that, guys, is how I made this helmet for my Jane Foster cosplay from Thor. I hope you found this video helpful for making your very own one, and if so, let me know in the comments. Like this video, and of course subscribe to the channel. Would love to have you as part of the community. Also, a big thank you to all of my company sponsors, and of course all of my members here on YouTube, specifically those legendary members who financially help support me so I can continue to do this as my full-time job and bring to you more cosplay tutorials. And I will see you for our next one. Much love, guys!